So the 4080 FE launch has officially happened now, and today is the official buying day of the RTX 4080s. We have the stupid NVIDIA embargo where they don't let us talk about the custom cards until a day later because they want all the limelight for their own FE cards. So now that this guy is done and out of the way, we're gonna talk about our first custom card here, which is the 4080 Neptune from iGame, brand under Colorful. So this card right here might be the nicest, cleanest, most highest quality build so far of any graphics card that we've taken a look at. Get your next gaming PC from Build Redux. Compare pricing to buying the parts yourself and stop overpaying. Pick your starting budget, see your estimated gaming performance, and then see your PC based on your choices. Plus, Redux offers a growing support hub to answer all your questions. And it's backed by a 2-year parts and labor warranty, so you're covered. Pick your budget, pick your games, and get Build Redux. On the surface, initially, it kind of just looks like the MSI Supreme, but it's actually quite a bit different. In terms of specs, there's nothing different. Remember, NVIDIA doesn't allow brands to customize the design in any way. Can't add CUDA cores, can't add GPU dies, can't add RAM, any of that sort of stuff. So it's got the same 9,728 CUDA cores as a Founders Edition. It's got the same 256-bit memory bus of GDDR6 and 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's got the same everything. The only thing that really the brands get to kind of play with is a little bit of firmware adjustment in terms of boost bins and their custom cooling solutions. Obviously, they chose to go with what might be the most overkill cooler of any of the RTX 4080s, a 360 millimeter AIO. In fact, on the side, it says powerful, weather, real, or virtual. Okay, one of the things that iGame needs to stop is the slogans. Remember the what's your game, what's your game? It's an amazing looking product. It doesn't need this gibberish on the side, okay? You're just taking away from your aesthetics. Just stop with the slogans, please, they're terrible. Anyway, moving on, if we look at the radiator here, it is a matte white finish. It's got a very kind of a futuristic space sort of a look with the design. The fans are RGB, and they are very high quality in terms of like the center ring is actually metal. A little bit wobbly on the centering of those, but the faster it spins, the less it will be noticeable really. Thumb screws, which is kind of interesting. So very nice machine-headed thumb screws. Everything's cable managed down here, nice and neat down the side. It's very similar to how the Fractal Design AIO was, where it's got a header built onto the radiator. So all the cables for the fans and the RGB come through the sleeving and then go into this kind of a junction block built onto the radiator. So this is everything. It's like, it's wired up. It gets all of its power through either the supplemental power, the 12 volt 3-pin, or the 3-plug 12 volt high power plug. So remember, the 4080s are using a 3-plug, not a 4-plug like the 4090s. And it does have a secondary plug on there as well. So if you want to control the RGB, but you don't want to use the iGame software, you can just plug it into any 3-pin ARGB header found on either a controller or your motherboard or maybe a case expansion controller or something. It can tie in with the rest of your software you're already using without having to add another piece of third-party software. The Shroud is metal. It's got kind of this double step, sort of a curved layer on here, which is nice because on the edge of this is LED strips. So you've got RGB LED strips there. You've got an RGB backlit iGame logo right there, which is so much nicer than the what's your game on the side. You've got this sort of a blue accent. And this is the only thing that takes away from the aesthetics, in my personal opinion, is although blue goes very nicely with silver, it's just, you know how I feel about forced color themes of, you know, hardware components for your system. So the blue, personally for me, takes away from it. But that's just personal preference. And then on the back right there, it says Neptune. But you know what, in terms of size, it's very reasonable. It's about the size you would expect the 4080 to have been. I mean, this, compared to it, is obviously a heck of a lot bigger. In fact, the RTX 4080 Strix card is exactly the same size as a 4090, which is completely unnecessary because these cards are 320 watt TDP for the reference or for the founders. Now, with the RTX 4090 Neptune, you got up to 635 watts of power budget, which is the highest of any of the 4090 cards out there. What we'll do before this video is over is we'll plug this back in and we'll take a look at the kind of overclocking we can get and the kind of power limit available to us, because on the FE, we got 110% power limit of the 3 plugs, which is technically 450 watts, but it gives you a little bit of additional budget. However, it really doesn't do a whole lot for overclocking. So what I'm curious now is Well, the thermal overhead of 360 millimeter radiator, which it's kind of funny because the 4090 Supreme from MSI only has a 280. So this is already more cooling for something with a much less power budget available to it than a 4090. We also have this button on the back right here. We have a normal and a turbo mode. This is something Colorful / iGaming is known for. Basically, all their cards have this kind of a turbo button on there. And what that does is it basically enables a turbo BIOS where it just forces it into higher states. So it will ramp up the fans, it will increase the boost bins, and it will hold those clocks longer than in normal mode. To me, this is personally unnecessary because there's no reason why it shouldn't just ship with that mode already ready to go given the amount of cooling that it has. This is a nice to have. It's basically just another way of doing the multi-BIOS button that people will have on the toggle on the side of the PCB. This is just one that's designed for you to be able to reach it outside of the case. So you just reach behind your case and push the button. It's not necessary because of the fact that you should just always be running the card, in my opinion, at its fastest speed available, given its thermals and its power limit. But let's go ahead and talk about the clocks or the benchmarks. We're gonna compare it to the FE, and we're also gonna compare it to AMD's current highest offering, at least at the time of making this video, which is the 6950 XT. Now there's no surprise, just like the 4080 FE, there's many titles where even in 1440p, you're still hitting engine cap. So as cards are getting faster and faster, they tend to outpace resolutions, and now we're to the point to where 4K gaming in triple digits is possible, depending on your settings and RT and all that. But you might have noticed in some of the titles, it's significantly faster than the FE card. Even though we didn't put the 4090 on there, maybe we should have, because of the fact that it starts to bump up to the 4090 performance of the FE. And that's because of the clock speed available to this. Now remember, cooling and power are the two things that determine how far your card will automatically overclock. All cards with GPU boost, both NVIDIA, which actually calls it GPU boost, and then AMD's cards with their turbo, I can't remember what they actually call it. Doesn't matter. Every single card will go higher than its base clocks and its boost clocks that are advertised because auto overclocking is a thing. It happens, it's been happening now since 600 series NVIDIA, like 680s and such. It will have a maximum speed available to it up to a maximum temperature. And as the temp goes up, that max speed comes down, and that's the way it balances out its power draw and its load. If there's availability in both those areas, it will automatically push the clocks up to the maximum specified clock in the firmware. This card hits 2910 out of the box with this cooler. 2910 megahertz. That's pretty fast. And the lowest we saw it get down to was actually 2895. And that's one boost bin, 15 megahertz. Remember the 15 megahertz boost bins. And that's with the turbo BIOS. So the reason why you're seeing it perform better than an FE is because of the fact that it is boosting higher. And it's boosting higher because of the thermal overhead. Now you could have probably done a 240 rad on this and been perfectly fine. But you don't have to take my word for it. What we're gonna do right now is we're gonna throw it in the system. We're gonna kind of see what sort of limits are available to us, what kind of power is it actually drawing, because one of the things we know about the RTX 4080 is the fact that it's a 320 watt TDP card, or TGP card, or total graphics power, which is the total power of the board, not just the die, but the RAM and the VRMs and all of the thermal loss and power loss through heat, all of that is taken into account with that power budget. This is a massive cooler for 320 watts, which our 4080 never hit even in like Port Royal. So let's throw it in the system and let's see what kind of limits we have available to us. Do we get any additional power limit above and beyond the 450 like we saw with the 4090s? And let's just see, you know, what the thermals and stuff look like so you guys can see for yourself. One thing I want to point out real quick about the power cable is the fact that it's kind of recessed under the shroud and it's inverted so that the clip part is on the inside, not facing the outside. It's kind of difficult to get your fingers in there to get it out. I just want to point that out. It's rough to try and finagle that out. Anyway, the total system power, which you can't actually see, but I'll call out, it's on the side of our power supply here, is 490 watts. So it's actually not terrible. Remember, this is a synthetic benchmark that doesn't use a CPU at all. So this is pretty much all graphics that's coming out of the power supply right now in terms of power draw, 467 watts, 468. The CPU is not doing much. If you're playing a title that uses a lot of GPU and CPU, obviously that'll go up. But what I want to see right here is what our temps look like. During that run, we maxed out at 42. As you can see, it is pulling, interestingly enough, the same amount of power that we would see as if we were running an RT test right now, because Port Royal pulls about the same amount of power. But this is so much better than the 4090. 4090 right here, we would be seeing over 450 watts or so, about 430 watts. But if we take a look at our temperatures, look at this. Low 40s. And that's expected because I've been water cooling computers for a long time. And I know that when graphics cards were about 250 watt TDP, I could keep the cards under 40 degrees, usually around the mid 30s to 36, 37 degrees Celsius under load. And then I noticed with like the 2080 Ti's, which were 250 to almost 300, depending on the custom cards, it would start hitting 40, 42 C, and I'm going, dang, what the heck is happening here? Why is it running so warm? And then starting to water cool 3080s, 3080 Ti's, 3090s, seeing mid to upper 40s on water cooling. I'm just like, what is happening here? And then seeing 50s and mid 50s on water cooled 4090s. It gets to the point to where even water cooling, you know, is just not a fast enough heat transfer for the amount of heat that's in these systems. Now putting a 360 on here, on a 320 watt part, like I said, that's pretty much in line with what I was seeing with the 300 plus watt TGPs on the 30 series card. So this is landing exactly as I would expect. These fans are barely turning. There is definitely warmth coming through this. So it's absolutely doing its job. I still think a 240 with a little bit faster fan curve could have done that, but this is all stock. Look at the core clock right here. We're only hitting 2790. I think we might be on the standard BIOS, which means I need to go ahead and reboot the system here. So now that I've loaded the turbo BIOS, it was indeed in normal. Look at the extra power limit we have now. 123. I do have the 4-pin cable connected to it. That's not gonna matter. It's only looking for 3. I do have the 4 pins off the 4090 connected to it because I'm a risk taker. Look at what it goes up to, 2880, 2910. See, remember what I told you in the review? It will boost to 2910, and then the lowest we ever saw it get was 2895, which is one 15 megahertz boost bin. So what I love about this card is it's one of the few cards, if not the only card, where changing it to a turbo BIOS or an OC BIOS or whatever does more than just changing a fan curve. It actually changes the boost pins. So you are getting tangible performance. I personally don't feel like that button is necessary. I feel like it should just always be in this mode because it's what it's designed to do. It's what it's designed to cool for. And look at our temps right now in heaven, 36C, and it will slowly rise over time to maybe 38. That's because heaven's just so easy for it to run. 233, that's why it's so cold, because remember how I said 250 watt cards with a custom water loop would usually sit there in the mid 30s? there's your proof. See, there's your 2895 right there that I was telling you about. And it won't go any lower than that. But that's interesting because that means our first boost bin is actually down in the 30s, where our first boost bin on the FE was actually at 61 degrees Celsius. That's where it dropped the bin. So I think this is a little bit too aggressive. I bet you if I can pull that back down to like 35, we'll get that 15 megahertz back. There's, okay, so 36, 2910. So it's at 36C. So 37C, which is that 1 degree we were sitting at, is where that first bin is. So let's now take a look at Port Royal. So yeah, same clocks, 2895, but like see how much hotter it gets initially because of the fact that the RT core is being loaded up does create more heat, but it's 3090. Aw, see, it's funny how there's like this hard wall around 3100 with any 40 series card, whether it be a 4080 or 4090 when it comes to Port Royal. It's like that 3100 mark, it's really hard to get past. So not only did it change the base clock, like the base clock moved up, so any offset is on top of that new base clock. It moved the power percent baseline up quite a bit too, because if we look right here, we were pulling in 328 watts, and that's 85% of the 123% limit. So doing the math on here, 85% power limit being 328 watts gives us a 385 watt baseline now. And by now looking at 123 watts, that gives us what, 470 or so watts available to it? A little bit more than the 3-pin technically is spec'd for, but here's the thing. They're nice to haves, but it's not gonna matter. And this is only for, I guess, if you were gonna do like custom liquid nitrogen cooling and stuff, but you still don't have voltage control. So they're like sales points to say, hey, you have access to this stuff. But that's also like saying, you know, in a car, we'll let the pedal go through the floorboard, but the butterfly and the throttle body still only goes to 100%. So it's like giving yourself more pedal throw doesn't change anything. So anyway, they're nice to haves. The BIOS really should just be that way no matter what. It performs great. It's just the problem is it's a premium price. These are dark times again with pricing. This is like, we went from Pascal's amazing price to performance to Turing's really upside down, expensive. It was just hard for anyone to afford it and justify it. And then 30 series was like this amazing price to performance again that just was never really realized because of scalping and worldwide shortages. And now we're back to the Turing ages again, where everything's astronomically expensive. So, and I also got a little bit of a gripe. I had to pay almost $400 to get this thing out of customs. I've never been sent a graphics card by a company where I was actually charged by customs to receive it. So this review cost me money, 400 bucks. You know what I could have bought for 400 bucks? A 3070. Anyway, it's our job to report on this stuff. It's your job to determine whether or not it's worth it to you. Sign off down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.